Hello everybody, this is Gamaniac here, and welcome to another video where today I am going to be reviewing the first two episodes of HBO's The Last of Us. This is my favorite video game of all time, and I am really excited to review the new TV adaptation, so if you're ready, let's get right into the action.
The number of confirmed deaths has passed 200. The governor has called a state of emergency.
There are hundreds and hundreds of bodies lining the streets.
Panic spread worldwide after a leaked report from the World Health Organization showed that the latest vaccination tests have failed.
With the bureaucrats out of power, we can finally take the necessary steps.
Los Angeles is now the latest city to be placed under martial law. All residents are required to report to their designated quarantine. Riots have continued for a third consecutive day, and winter rations are at an all-time low.
A group calling themselves the Fireflies have claimed responsibility for both attacks.
Their public charter calls for the return of all branches of government.
Demonstrations broke out following the execution of 6 more alleged Fireflies.
You can still rise with us. Remember, when you're lost in the darkness, look for the light. Believe in the Fireflies.
Let me start this off by admitting something. I was scared. I heard HBO would be making a Last of Us series, and I got really excited before remembering that video game to TV show / movie adaptations don't do the best. I mean, Arcane did it, but for every Arcane, there's an Uncharted. I was terrified that they'd make my favorite video game, and quite possibly the best video game of all time, into something horrendous and unrecognizable from the source material. Fast forward to the casting, and apart from Pedro Pascal, I was even more afraid. This wasn't looking very good for me. But then I stopped and really thought, why? Why don't I like this casting? And the first thing that came to mind was Bella Ramsey does not look like Ellie. And then again, I stopped and thought, does it matter? If the character is the same, and the writing is good, and the script is good, does it matter if they don't look exactly like the game? No. No, it doesn't. They get bonus points for just how great Pedro Pascal looks as Joel, and for casting Marlene as, well, Marlene. But Tess doesn't look exactly like Tess, nor does Ellie, nor does Sarah, or Tommy. And do I have a problem with this? No. Why? Because everything else is amazing. The characters are there, the writing is good, the acting, the script, it's all there. And the music. They got the same guy that made the music for the game to make the music for the TV series. It's phenomenal. Okay, now that I'm past that little opening ramble, let's get into the main course here. Let me for real kick this off by talking about how happy I am with this so far. This has been a really faithful adaptation of the game, and we're only 2 episodes in, but I feel like I can still say that because they've tweaked so many little things about the show to make it different from the game, and none of it has irritated me or made me grimace and say that I don't like it. Everything they've done so far to differentiate the show from the game has made me pretty happy, and it's made a lot of sense. Before I get to the main body of this, I just want to say really quickly that everything I'm saying today is not scripted, apart from the very opening ramble thing that I just did there. I feel like it wouldn't benefit me to do a whole review where I meticulously put words in certain places to make it sound more professional. I feel like a review should really be from the heart, and everything I usually do is from the heart, but it's kind of watered down by the time that I have and the time that it takes to write a script. So, let's get right back into it. I don't want to waste too much time here. Easter eggs. That's the first thing I want to talk about, is the Easter eggs. When they're in the museum, in the second episode, there is the model ship and the soldier's uniform that is also in the game. And when they went into the museum, I made a little I Spy game for myself, and I just there's a ship and there's a uniform, and I'm going to try to spot both of them, because those are the only 2 things I remember being in the museum in the game that I want to find in the show. And I found them both. They were there, and I was really, really happy that they stuck with at least that part. I'm sure there are parts of the museum that are different in the show, but for that part at least, they stuck with the game-accurate set design, and that made me really, really happy. Another thing that I noticed was that Sarah, Tommy, and Joel are all wearing their same shirts, and I think in Joel's case, the exact same entire outfit as he was in the prequel section of the game where he came in on the phone and he was talking about all the contractor and he can't lose the job and that stuff. Another Easter egg is when Sarah comes back from the neighbors, and I believe their names are the Adlers. I don't think we got a last name for them in the game, but when Sarah comes back from their house in the show, she borrowed a movie and she hands it to Joel, and it's Curtis and Viper 2, which I believe was mentioned in the second game, but it could be the first. I should really replay the first game, for a 15th time. That's actually, I'm not kidding, by the way. I've played it 14 times and I'm still forgetting stuff, so I think I gotta get back into that. One more thing is, speaking of the prequel part of the game, the backseat POV as the family, Joel, Tommy, and Sarah, flee Boston. It's in the game, it's this backseat behind all the characters' point of view where you can move Sarah around to look out the windows, and you can see all three of the characters in the road ahead, and it's cool. It's really cool. And they did that in the show as well. I think they did it a little bit differently in the show, but I don't remember the exact positioning of the camera in the show. So I believe they did that a little bit differently, but it's still, like, the spirit of that scene is still there. One last thing in the Easter egg section that I really want to go over is, I think it's in the second episode, where Tess, Joel, and Ellie are crossing that plank in between the buildings. And when they get across, Joel and Ellie, Joel, right out of the game, asks Ellie, "Is this everything you've hoped for?" And Ellie responds with her exact line from the game, "The jury's still out, but you can't deny that view." And I thought it was really, really cool that they kept that from the game, as well as one of my favorite interactions from them in the entire game. And again, there's a lot of that. It's my favorite game of all time. There's a lot of really good interactions between the two main protagonists that you spend the most time with, but that one stands out every time I play the game, and I'm really, really happy that they kept that in. And the next thing that I want to talk about is the differences between the game and the show. And these are things that are pretty well entirely different, if not just mostly different. So we're going to kick this off with a pretty big one, and that is that Frank, Bill's partner, is in the show. Physically, literally, there's an actor, he'll have a line or two, or probably more, but he is in the show as a character. And I think that that's going to expand on Bill's character a little bit more, because we got quite a bit of Bill's character in the game. You know, he's the guy that's really paranoid, maybe a little bit crazy, judging by how much he talks to himself while Joel is with him, and booby traps the entire city that he's in. So we have a pretty solid idea of who Bill is, but we don't really know who Frank is. Bill just says that Frank was his partner. And Bill gets this letter from Frank delivered to him by Joel that details why he left and his whole relationship with Bill and how he feels about Bill and all of that, whatever. But Frank is in the show, and I think that's going to benefit Bill's character, but he was not in the game, so it is a pretty big difference. Then another one, it's kind of different. It's the same sort of idea, but it happened differently, is Tess's end in episode 2. Pretty well at the end of episode 2. I think after that there's like one more scene with Joel and Ellie where they're running away from the Capitol building. And Tess's end in the game, she gets infected. She tells Joel and Ellie and tells them to run, and she will hold back as many Fedra officers as she can. I think in the game she takes out 3 of them before they shoot her, and then it's up to Joel and Ellie to either run away or kill the rest of the Fedra officers. In the show, Tess gets infected, which, by the way, she gets bit in the same spot in the show as she does in the game. Cool little, I don't know if it's a similarity or if it's an Easter egg, but it happens the same way, which is pretty cool. Not for Tess, of course, but, for us. In the show, she gets bit, she shows Ellie and Joel, she tells them to run, and they run, but what they're running from this time is a horde of infected and not Fedra officers. Tess throws hand grenades everywhere. She pours either oil or gasoline, I'm gonna guess gasoline, all over the floors, throws around hand grenades, anything that'll blow up when it gets lit on fire. When the infected come through the building, she tries to flick this lighter, but it doesn't ignite right away, and this infected has a chance to, a little bit uncomfortably, kiss Tess and burrow the cordyceps pretty much directly into her brain. That's when the lighter flicks and she drops it, and the whole first floor of the Capitol building implodes. That did not happen in the game, but again, I don't know if I actually said this, I don't know if it's again, but I'll say it now. You cannot have a good adaptation of a game if it's exactly the same as the game. So you're gonna have to change things. It's the same way if you're adapting a movie from a comic, like Marvel. You cannot make a carbon copy of something and have it be good. So with Tess's End, I liked the way they did it. I liked that they changed it. I like how it was still a really heroic moment, self-sacrificing moment for Tess. And now we're really going to get to the meat of the story with Joel and Ellie, and we're going to meet Bill and Frank in the next episode, and I'm really excited about that. Another thing that they've changed is the underground fungus. When they're passing over this bridge, Tess tells Ellie about how the fungus is burrowed underground, and by stepping on it in one place, you can alert a horde of infected in a completely different area, and they will know exactly where you are, which is exactly what happened in the Capitol building. Joel shot a infected, it fell, hit the fungus, and it alerted the entire horde as to exactly where they were. So that's cool. Didn't happen in the game, but I love it. I think that's probably how it would really work in real life, right? Another thing which ties directly into this underground fungus is no spores. They didn't want to, well, I'm assuming they didn't want to shroud the actors' faces in gas masks, and so they removed spores from the game completely. From the show completely. And as a result of this, they needed a different way for it to infect people. And so they chose these tendrils that emerge from the mouth of people or infected, as I just mentioned with Tess's End, and they just burrow into people, and it's these tendrils, and I think we'll talk about this later. I was going to mention something, but I'm actually going to devote a little mini section to this. Another thing that they changed is more backstory, and I'm actually going to put a scene from the show right here, and I'm going to show you what I mean by more backstory.
Not bacteria, not viruses, so...
Fungus. Yes, that's the usual response. Fungi seem harmless enough. Many species know otherwise, because there are some fungi who seek not to kill, but to control. Let me ask you, where do we get LSD from?
Where do you get it from?
It comes from ergot, a fungus. Psilocybin, also a fungus. Viruses can make us ill, but fungi can alter our very minds. There's a fungus that infects insects, gets inside an ant, for example, travels through its circulatory system to the ant's brain, and then floods it with hallucinogens, thus bending the ant's mind to its will. The fungus starts to direct the ant's behavior, telling it where to go, what to do, like a puppeteer with a marionette. And it gets worse. The fungus needs food to live, so it begins to devour its host from within, replacing the ant's flesh with its own. But it doesn't let its victim die, no. It keeps its puppet alive by preventing decomposition. How? Where do we get penicillin from?
Fungus. Dr. Schoenheiss, you're in distress.
Fungal infection of this kind is real, but not in humans.
True, fungi cannot survive if its host's internal temperature is over 94 degrees. And currently, there are no reasons for fungi to evolve to be able to withstand higher temperatures. But what if that were to change? What if, for instance, the world were to get slightly warmer? Well, now, there is reason to evolve. One gene mutates, and an Ascomycetia, Candida, ergot, Cordyceps, Aspergillus, any one of them could become capable of burrowing into our brains and taking control not of millions of us, but billions of us. Billions of puppets with poisoned minds, permanently fixed on one unifying goal: to spread the infection to every last human alive by any means necessary. And there are no treatments for this, no preventatives, no cures. They don't exist. It's not even possible to make them.
And so that right there was a scene from the show that was not in the game and gives you some pretty good backstory about how this is happening and really what it is. Everyone's always afraid of viruses, pandemics. But what this is something that can actually scientifically happen, and I think that's way scarier. Another thing that I want to talk about here in the differences is the flower. And there's a little bit of an explanation here as to what is happening in the flower. In the first scene of the... Actually, no, that's a lie. It's not the first scene. But in the first episode, Tommy, Joel, and Sarah hear about this incident at a flower factory that's going on in the capital of Indonesia. And in that episode, there are multiple instances where they are supposed to eat something involving flour. For instance, in the start, it's Joel's birthday, and so Joel was supposed to have birthday pancakes, but they didn't have pancake mix, so they didn't have the flour. And when they were leaving to take Sarah to school, the neighbors offered them biscuits, which have flour in them, but they were running a little bit late on time, so they didn't accept and they left. Later, when Sarah was helping the neighbors make cookies, she was going to eat a cookie, again, has flour in the batter, but upon finding out that they were raisin cookies and not chocolate chip cookies, she chose not to have any. So this cordyceps can somehow travel within, or not travel, but like live within flour. And wherever that flour goes, these pieces of fungi can also go. And that's how people were really getting affected. So I thought that was a really nice, cool touch. And another, the last difference that I want to talk about was Ellie's second bite, which happens way earlier in her life in the show than it does in the games. In the games, Ellie gets a second bite when she is captured momentarily by the Rattlers, when she's looking for Abby. And in the show, she gets a second bite right before the Capitol building, which is what prompts Tess to show Joel and to prove to Joel that Ellie is telling the truth and that she is actually immune. So there's all these little differences in the show, and I mentioned it earlier that these were not in the game, but they're inserted into the show, into the lore, in a way that makes me feel really good about it. They're not trying to change too many things. It's not like they made a new show and they were like, oh, now it's not fungus, now it's actual zombies like Walking Dead. Ha ha ha. It's the same thing, just with a bit of a different twist or a little different aspects of it to differentiate it from the game, just so that it's not a carbon copy, just like the game, but live action. And I love it. The next category, whoa, that's my bad. The next category that I want to talk about is the similarities, but I'm going to start a new audio file for that because I am running out of time on the footage. I'll be right back after I go get more. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about are the similarities in the show and in the game. These are things that I don't really classify as Easter eggs because they're more or less an integral part of the character or just a noticeable and memorable set piece. For instance, Ellie in the show, just like in the game, can't swim. There is, in the game, these planks that you can carry around and she'll hop on them and you can transport her in the water from place to place. But, not planks, sorry, skids. But in the show, it doesn't look like we'll be doing that right now anyways. She's just kind of waiting on the shallow end of the water, so we'll see if they can pull off a practical skid scene. Another thing that is the same in the show as in the game is Joel's job, and it's not really specified what Joel's job is. He never says like, "Oh, I am a carpenter," or "I am a whatever other trade." But he does mention pouring, which I associate with pouring concrete. So it has definitely has something to do with a contractor because he's talking to Tommy on the phone in the game about the contractor, and in the show they kind of talk the same way. You know, they can't frame until they can't pour until they frame, or frame until they pour. So Joel's job is the same. The burning farm that you see in the opening segment of the game when you are when the family is fleeing Boston, which I think in the game is Lewis's farm, but I believe in the show they said the farm belonged to someone different. I don't remember what the name was, but I don't think it was Lewis's farm. But the burning barn, not barn, sorry, the burning farm is still there. Another thing I want to talk about in terms of similarities is the amazing clicker scene. Because in the game, the first game, there are clickers in the museum. I believe there's 3 of them. And I think there was 3 of them in the show as well. But that scene was so good. And I have to gush over this for a second, because I don't know if it's really a similarity apart from the fact that the clickers were also in the museum in the game. But this scene did the clickers so well. And I think they're actually worse in this show in terms of actual like survivability. I think that because I remember a scene in the show, which is good because I just watched it. But like Joel took a sharp breath, and this clicker heard it. You know, like in the game, you can breathe, you can crouch walk, you can reload your ammo. You can reload your gun, and they won't really hear you. Joel took a decently loud breath, and this clicker heard it and was on him. And these things are rabid. Like in the game, they run at you and they flail their arms and everything, trying to grab whatever they can. But these things will jump over things. They'll plow through shelves just to get to you. And I think it's absolutely horrifying, and it reminds me of World War Z. And I love it. I think those things are freaking horrifying. And I am really, really excited to see the bloaters and potentially shamblers in season 2. So, yeah, that's it for similarities. That's the Easter eggs, differences, similarities. I might just talk for a second or two now about how I really, really like this show. And I did that at the start. But it's such a good, faithful adaptation of the game in the sense that it is an adaptation. It's not, again, I said this before, I'll say it again. It's not a carbon copy of the game. It is a faithful adaptation of the game. And as an adaptation, it is amazing. I hope that made sense. That made perfect sense in my head, but I hope it doesn't sound like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over again. But this show is a reason why it's so highly rated pretty much everywhere that rates shows, and it is highly rated on this YouTube channel as well. I won't be reviewing like every adaptation. I think my stance on Arcane is pretty clear from the opening little tidbit there. But yeah, this show, I'm just pretty much just reviewing it because it's my favorite video game of all time, and I will be reviewing all of the episodes on this channel, but in 2-episode margins until the finale, which I'm pretty sure there's 9 episodes. So I'm going to be reviewing every 2 weeks until the finale, so expect that, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This show so far is an absolute 10 out of 10. I have not missed, and because the music guy from the game is on there, and Neil Druckmann is on there, and Pedro Pascal, and all the other amazing actors and actresses here, I really do not think that this show will be missing anytime in the future, and I am really excited to watch the rest of it. Hope you guys are too. This was Gamaniac reviewing the first 2 episodes of The Last of Us. I hope you guys have a wonderful evening, day, night, wherever you guys are. Thank you for watching.